I pulled into my driveway on a Tuesday evening, thinking about leftover meatloaf and whether the Bruins had a late game. Then my brain just stopped. Where my grandfather's cabin had stood for 40 years, cedar coffee summer rain, there was a rectangle of dirt splinters and fresh tire ruts. In the middle of it, the HOA president, Sabrina Voss, stood like a game show host with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Evening, Daniel." She chirped, lifting the paper like a trophy. "Emergency demolition. 22,500 due in 30 days. Community safety, you understand. You know that floaty feeling when your body is there, but the rest of you is still catching up." "Yeah, that happened. I asked where my cabin went. She said it had rot danger urgent this and emergency that. Then tapped a signature on a letter that looked official if you squinted and didn't think too hard." I took the paper with hands that didn't quite feel like mine. Watched a deputy take photos. Heard him say it might be a civil matter, and realized that if I didn't keep my head, grief would do the talking for me. That night, I did the thing I do when something smells wrong. I read. The seal on her paper was a hair off center. The margins were almost, but not quite right. The signature for a city inspector named Todd McNeil looked like it had been practicing for 5 minutes and took a bow. I called the city. No Todd McNeil anywhere. I pulled the parcel records. The cabin's permit was clean as a whistle. Here's the kicker that changed the oxygen in my lungs. The cabin went up in 1980 Pine Hollow. HOA didn't file its charter until 1993, which means grandfathered and protected under state law, which means Sabrina didn't have the authority to knock down a doghouse, let alone a legal structure my grandfather built nail by nail. At 8:55 the next morning, I was in the county records office with Joanne Pike, who has been guarding paper longer than I've been shaving. She slid copies across the counter, tapped dates with her pen, and said the line in a calm librarian voice that still managed to ring like a bell demolishing a grandfathered structure without consent. "Isn't a fine, Mr. Cole. It's a felony." I should have felt relief, but what I felt was anger with coordinates. Because once you start looking, the pattern is suddenly wearing neon Voss community strategies, buying up stressed properties at suspicious discounts, quick resales to an out-of-state developer called Borealis Urban Group. Every sale preceded by HOA pressure letters that made people fold to save their sanity. And my lot, my lake frontage, sat exactly where a future brochure would want to print an infinity pool. When I got home, there was a manila envelope wedged under my door. No return address, just the smell of trouble. Inside were memos and screenshots and notes in Sabrina's loopy handwriting that had never met the word no. Phase 1 target selection. Phase 2 documentation control. Phase 3 removal. Phase 4 permanent conversion. Next to my name, government clerk, low leverage, folds under pressure. You know what I mean when I say a line can tell you everything you need to know about a person. That line did. I called my wife Riley, corporate attorney, sharp as a fresh razor, the kind of steady that keeps a house upright in a storm. "It's bigger than the cabin," I said. "I know," she said, and I could hear keys tapping. Mail fraud. Wire fraud, maybe deprivation of rights, if they targeted protected folks. Conspiracy if we connect the dots. Do not pay a dime. Pine Hollow called an emergency meeting for Thursday night. Less than 24 hours notice, which is how you schedule something when you don't want the room to be full. And Sabrina turned the community center into a budget TED Talk with ring lights, a branded backdrop, and a slide titled Community Safety Through Proper Enforcement. For 15 minutes, she narrated my family's history, like she was reading a brochure. severe rot compromised supports, imminent failure, while a generic engineering diagram floated behind her like clip art. When the floor opened, I asked a simple question, in a voice that didn't shake. Can you show your legal authority to demolish grandfathered structures that predate the HOA? She smiled the kind of smile people use when they think charisma can outrun facts, and said a sentence that sounds strong until you write it down. All structures must meet current safety standards. Community safety trumps historical considerations, which is code for I didn't do the homework. I held up my phone with the 1983 permit, the 1993 HOA filing, and the county seal that didn't wobble under a zoom. The room made the sound a room makes when people start doing math together. Mrs. Ellison, whose husband hunted with my grandfather, stood with her cane and asked clear as prayer, "Did you knock down a legal building?" Sabrina didn't answer the question. She attacked me for working downtown. That's when Tom Morton, quiet guy, eyes like good flint, stood and laid out 2 years of minutes and bank screenshots that connected pressure letters to cheap sales to quick flips. And the room shifted from opinion to recognition. Oh, we got one of those letters. Our fence was suddenly 2 inches too high. Our application disappeared twice until we paid a fine. The next morning, my office line rang with a voice from the administrative office of the U.S. courts, asking about complaints against a federal employee named Daniel Cole, abusing work time to intimidate community leaders. And I almost laughed because Sabrina had been calling random federal numbers to report a federal judge to himself. "We'll handle it internally." "Your Honor," the woman said, and you could hear the smile she wasn't supposed to have. That afternoon, Sabrina announced a live stream for Friday. Effective techniques for managing problem residents, a training for area HOA leaders that would be broadcast to the internet with ring lights and confidence. Some car crashes, you can't look away from some car crashes you RSVP to. Riley and I made a plan. I created a burner account, North Shore Watcher 24, and drafted questions that would invite a person who loves their own voice to talk their way into the shape of their choices. We sat apart in the room while the viewer counter ticked past 400, and Sabrina smiled into the lens like it owed her money. Background research is key, she told the chat. Government workers are underpaid and risk-averse. Pressure plus embarrassment equals compliance. I typed, "What if the government employee has more authority than you researched?" She clapped lightly, leaned in and said, "That's impossible. People like that don't have real power." That was my mark. I stood and walked down the aisle like I was asking about a bake sale. "Ms. Voss, I think you might be mistaken about my qualifications," I said, then opened a leather case to the nearest camera. "I'm Daniel Cole, United States District Judge for the District of New Hampshire." The room stopped breathing. Sabrina barked for the tech to kill the feed. He froze. The counter climbed. I kept it even. "You just spent 25 minutes teaching government procedures to the government," I said. "You described method and intent admitted to fraudulent documentation and broadcast it to the public with an autosave." Yeah, that happened. By morning, the clip had 3 million views, and at 9:17 a.m., the FBI's Financial Crimes Squad called calm and awake. Last night's video accelerated an ongoing investigation, the agent said, which is federal for thank you for wrapping the present. Victims from other states started calling in. Same letters, same pressure, same cheap sales, same Borealis shuffle. And suddenly, Sabrina's world wasn't a neighborhood fiefdom. It was a multi-state pattern, with real statutes attached. 6 months later, we sat 3 rows back in a courtroom that wasn't mine, while Chief Judge Corcoran presided, and Sabrina wore a county jumpsuit, the color of a squash blossom. The government laid its bricks: wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, deprivation of rights, a little racketeering when they mapped the enterprise line by line. And they played a clean cut of Sabrina explaining how to apply pressure so people would fold. Victims spoke, and the room got very quiet. Mr. B. Alvarez losing the garage, where he rebuilt motorcycles with his kid Ms. Darden, having panic attacks after the third warning in 7 days, Mrs. Ellison lifting her chin to say, "We moved here for neighbors, not management." The sentence came like weather: 5 years in federal prison, 3 years supervised release. Restitution to every identified victim, lifetime ban from serving as a fiduciary or officer for any nonprofit or association. And the unspoken sentence every bully hears sooner or later: fear isn't authority, and paperwork isn't law. Pine Hollow changed on purpose. Tom ran for HOA president and won on Sunlight. Budgets online meetings open, votes counted out loud. Riley and I took restitution and opened a one-room shop above a sandwich place called the Compass North Project. We print a simple guide for every mailbox in the township about grandfather clauses, how to read a letter that looks official, who to call who actually has a badge. We rebuilt the cabin with volunteer Saturdays and donated lumber, not a museum piece of promise, and there's a small plaque by the steps that reads, "Some structures are made of law before they're made of wood." Some nights I sit on that new porch and think about a clipboard that tried to teach me about power, and I hear my grandfather's voice reminding me that real power is a neighbor who knows the difference between a rule and a right, a clerk who won't hurry a stamp, a deputy who comes back the next day and says I read the statute. You were right. Was I theatrical in that live stream? Sure. Was I wrong to wait until the camera was rolling? You tell me. Did I set a trap, or did I let a person walk into the shape of her own choices? That's the debate I'm opening the door to tonight. So talk to me in the comments. Are HOAs protecting neighborhoods or preying on them? Where's the line between standards and harassment? What would you have done at the reveal? And if you've ever had paperwork used as a weapon or watched someone pick the absolute wrong person to push, share it. If this hit a nerve, hit like, subscribe, send it to the neighbor who reads every bylaw, and I'll see you on the next one. Keep your compass north and your paperwork in order.